Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Von Spakowski, I'd like to start with you today. One provision of the ACE Act that we haven't discussed yet today is the use of the existing Election Assistance Commission, a bipartisan group, to provide a forum to share best practices with states around the country, covering things such as audits, certification and testing of election systems, chain of custody, and other basics that are really essential to effective elections. Would you share with us why you believe doing that, the sharing of those best practices, is important?
Well, that's the way election officials improve. I mean, look, we have the most decentralized election system of any Western democracy. It's run, as you well know, down at the county government level. Secretaries of state oversee that, but it's really county government officials, all the folks sitting at this table. They're the ones that are doing voter registration and running the polling places. So we have literally thousands of local election officials, and sharing best practices is the best way to improve our elections. And that includes things like, look, one of the things this bill does is it makes it clear that HAVA funds can be used for post-election audits. That is vitally important. Financial and accounting audits are ubiquitous in the business world. Every business, every corporation, nonprofits have to undergo audits, and yet they are virtually non-existent in the election area. Every state needs to put in a system for comprehensive post-election audits that don't just recount ballots to make sure that the hand count agrees with machine count, but to go through the entire system and make sure that all state and federal laws were followed, individuals were able to access the polling place and vote properly, that complaints, when they were filed, were properly heard and taken care of. All of that needs to be audited, and only a handful of states have started doing that. Providing federal funding is very important for that.
And on that subject, Ms. Woolard, I'd like to return to a line of questioning that you had with the ranking member Morelli, where you discussed the challenges at a local election office that you have in addressing and responding to public inquiries about voter eligibility. And I will tell you, as a former elections official, I want to acknowledge that I understand that's a real challenge. You have a finite set of resources, a finite number of employees, and certainly in Florida, we too were subject to many inquiries, many lawsuits, and things of that nature. But I'd like to hear from you how you would suggest then that we balance the needs of elections offices with those of the public, who in many cases have well-founded concerns, maybe have done their own research, identified things on the voter rolls that give them concerns. I know we all share a desire for the public to have confidence in our elections and our outcomes and in the strength of those voter rolls. So how would you suggest that a citizen, a member of the public, who has concerns can get those concerns about the eligibility of voters addressed?
Well, if you were to continue along the vein of the voter challenge law that we have right this minute, I think there should be some real guardrails about how many times any particular individual could make a challenge and how many challenges they could make and the form in which that challenge would be made. I think I would really appreciate it if the audience wouldn't speak while I'm trying to answer. It's quite distracting. So I think that, that's the fundamental problem. When we receive a list of 10,000 voters and it's 3,000 of whom had a geographical reference to their address, which everyone in the city of Atlanta has, but yet it triggers us having to respond in 10 days, it's quite distracting.
But in the event that, because of course some groups and some individuals are much more dedicated to this than others, and so there will be some groups and some individuals who have a higher number of these challenges. And I think one of our obligations as elections officials is to find a way to be sure that we're responsive to the public. And so where they have concerns, whether it's one concern or 1,000 concerns, that we're finding a way efficiently as elections officials to hear them and address those concerns. So, one of the questions I know that has been discussed is, should that be at the state level as opposed to the local election? But I don't think we can take the position that we're simply not going to respond, or that we're not going to respond because the requests are too numerous. Dr. Ruth, let me ask you the same question. What are your thoughts on how we can be communicating back with the public who have concerns about the integrity of our rolls, that election officials are hearing them and addressing those concerns?
Yeah, so I think there are two things, and I think Hans touched on one, and that is best practices. And so one of the things is really understanding how are other states dealing with challenges. New Hampshire has that law in particularly. And also the spirit of the law. I think it's also important for the department to put into place a criteria for hearing challenges that can be posted on the website so that persons who are submitting challenges, that they understand what the criteria is. It is up to the person submitting the challenge to provide the preponderance of evidence.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields